All right, good turnout here.
I just left the gym,
There we go.
And-
Okay.
so
So-
I'm 2 minutes from home.
That's
Yes.
When I work out in the morning, I drive 3 miles, and if I feel really good, I'll drive 6 miles. So it's no problem. Hey, Cass, can I see everybody on the screen?
Sure.
Yeah.
And let's why don't we put everybody to mute? Alan, we're right at 11 o'clock.
That's what I want.
Here we
Perfect.
go. We're going to go ahead and
Okay.
kick off.
Yeah,
Welcome,
go.
everybody. We appreciate your reviews to date on $1 Million Influence. Alan and I are here for the Ask Me Anything session. We appreciate the reviews that have started to populate Amazon. Several have written to me to say they're finishing the book and will finish their review imminently. We appreciate you both evangelizing and referring the book. So welcome. This is 45 minutes. That's our max schedule. But we'll stop when the questions run dry. And we are not coming forward with a script. We are here to respond to you. Alan, you want to just say a quick hello?
First, I want to congratulate Gene for being named Lobbyist of the Year. Quite an honor. It's a blind review. You're nominated, so that's quite good. So congratulations to Gene.
Thank
Shows at least one of the two authors has credibility for this book, so that's important. And when you're ready to ask a question, just ask it or raise your hand. Cass is going to control this. If you prefer the chat room, that's fine too. But if you don't get to ask your question, it's your fault, not ours. So who wants to start? Well, we're done.
I know there's some bold people out there.
I think Wendy is raising her hand. Wendy, you can unmute yourself.
Go for it, Wendy.
So Jean, in the last video I was on, you talked about how your clients are never going to get more than 8 minutes for a presentation. In my world, there are 7-minute presentations. And my question for you is how much timing and understanding the client's timing has to do with influence?
I think it has a lot to do with it because it's fundamentally about respect. I didn't necessarily say that they only get 8 minutes. A typical federal meeting, for example, might be scheduled for 20 or 30 minutes. However, you don't want to use all of that time. You need to allow breathing room. If you're in Congress having a meeting, it may be a stand-up meeting in a hallway outside an anteroom where you don't even get 8 minutes. But if you've gone through the exercise of preparing to succinctly deliver your message, the issue, the background, the discussion, the recommendation in 8 minutes, you know that you're going to get your major points across, and you're allowing some space for the audience to ask questions. So it's really just about being prepared. I have found that even articulate speakers, presidents of companies benefit from just a couple of dry runs of that exercise. Doing it in advance, we might do it on a Zoom call and show the individual the recording so they can see for themselves how they perform. It sounds so basic, but it has really worked for me across the executive branch and in Congress. Who's next? Cass, you have the full view.
I do have the full view. I'm looking around to see if anybody's raising their hand. Folks, you can drop a question in the chat if you would like. Anne says, I have trouble getting started on a call or in a meeting. Do you have any good opening lines to get a great start?
I have trouble getting what?
I have trouble getting started on a call or in a meeting. Do you have any opening lines to get a great start?
Well, sure. I mean, it depends whether you're in person or remote, I think, to some extent. But if you're meeting someone for the first time, can I see Anne? Is this possible? The way this works?
I will look.
Or see everybody?
Uh,
I see enough of Gene.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. Do I have to hit gallery view or something here?
you
No,
could hit
see.
gallery view, or I can just remove.
There
you
we
from
go.
the
That's what I
There
want.
we go.
All right.
That
So,
works.
Anne, the thing is this. Anne Donnelly, are you asking this? Yeah. How you doing, Anne? If I'm meeting somebody the first time, I like to ask this question. I'm curious, what prompted you to spend this time with me? Because I want to have a conversation, not a presentation. And so I don't go right into business, but nor do I go into, I don't see a picture on the wall and say, how long have you been playing golf? But what prompted you to have this? If I've been referred to this person, I would say, how long have you known Mary? I understand you used to work together. I've known her for a year and a half, and I might start with that common reference. And or if something happened that morning in the news or late last night, I might bring that up. And I might say something like, especially if it's divorced from this person, the second largest trucking company in the nation just went bankrupt. How's that going to affect you? Something like that. And am I answering your question? Okay. Gene, you want to add to that? Or?
My only difference would be if I were the one that had initiated the meeting, I would be looking for clues immediately on arrival to see if there's something of common ground. I think Alan has pointed out, sometimes people have a fishing photo or a family photo, but I don't spend a lot of time on sort of biographical background if it's a new meeting, and I don't give up too much of that 8 minutes on the soft fluff, so to speak. If it's a meeting that I've initiated, I want people to see me as a very credible business-like person, capable of moving in the moment on that first interaction.
I think influence is largely a question of being in the moment. And while you can have a script in your head or you can anticipate certain situations, for example, when you first walk into an office, that's why I was curious about whether it was live or remote. When you first walk into an office, there's only 3 or 4 things the buyer can say to you. The buyer can say, nice to meet you. Did you have trouble getting here? Would you like some coffee? And things like this. And the buyer will offer, either a seat across from the desk or in some comfortable furniture. There's a limit. So if you're prepared for that sort of feasible set of probability, fine. But as you go forward, the influence to me is best wielded if it's in the moment and you listen to what's going on and you respond in that moment. And that's the best way to direct people because you're taking something they offered. Okay, who else? There we go. Rex.
Yes, I'm Rex Howes. I read the whole book and enjoyed it immensely. Chapter 2, Accountability and Authority. I'm not sure I absorbed the difference there. Could you give maybe a 1 or 2 minute or however long synopsis?
Let me start with
accountability and authority and what the difference is.
Yeah, this is my 2 cents. So let me start with this. I'll turn it over to Gene. We have accountability as consultants, coaches, outside professional services providers. Our accountability would include meeting deadlines. It would include performing in a quality manner. It would include confidentiality and so forth. And in fact, in my proposals, it says joint accountabilities. And the client has accountabilities, respond within a certain amount of time. However, that's not the same as authority, which is the ability to make changes in the organization. And so the reason for a trusting relationship with a buyer, among other things, is there's a situation going on over here where somebody has to be changed in that position or has to be admonished or his or her people aren't attending the meetings we've scheduled. I can't make them do that. I can't make them. I can't threaten them. I have no carrot or stick. So now I go to the buyer and say, you have authority. You have to talk to this person. One more thing, Rex. A lot of people take a position as interim CFO, interim sales director, and things like this. You have to be very careful because you're really still not a full-time employee of that business. And so you might have a load of accountability, but no real authority. And that's destined for failure. Okay. Is that helpful?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Gene, you want to add?
Sure. I took the military perspective in some of the descriptions of how these are differentiated. A captain of a ship is accountable for anything that happens on that ship, good, bad, or ugly. And that's because they have the overarching authorities to make any changes appropriate into how that crew is brought together, how they're trained, how they interact. When you transpose that over to a business environment, we're trying to convey that you want to understand who has what authorities to make decisions, who has the power to make a decision. So the marketing person isn't going to make a decision about a real estate acquisition, for example. But somebody more senior may have accountability for decisions made in either one of those silos. So that's a distinction. Recognizing, are you speaking with the right person who has the ability within their job description to give you feedback on what you're proposing, is how you're probing for who has the authority. The accountability is who is ultimately charged with making something happen or not happen. And then we add the third close cousin, responsibility. Responsibility is sort of a forward-looking concept. And we use the example of a pilot running through a checklist. The concern for passenger safety is so important that they don't leave things to chance. They are responsible for making those preparations. They're also accountable if something goes wrong. So 3 different categories there: authority, accountability, and responsibility. If you think about the organization to which you're trying to engage, you should be able to identify where do those ownerships rest.
Hey, Rex, speaking of pilots, many years ago, a 747 from Japan Airlines crashed. And it was determined it was not pilot error. It was a structural fault in the aircraft. Everybody died, 300 people. And the CEO of Japan Airlines resigned. And he said, I take accountability for this. And I think one thing to think about is that in a lot of organizations, people tend to shun accountability. And it's dangerous because what do they say? The buck stops here, right? And so the Japanese have had a history of accepting that kind of accountability, which is very instructional. So I just wanted to make sure that, you understood that as well.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Gene.
You bet.
Richard has a question in the chat. He says, I'm finding more of my work is helping leaders strengthen their influencing skills. How do you help them see the importance of it? And what are a couple of tips to help them?
You want to go first?
Sure. I think an overarching concept in our book is not trying for the ultimate win. You think of the wrestler jumping from the top rope to score the ultimate winning point where he just puts his counterpart out of action. That's not the goal. The goal is to find this range of feasible solutions that provide enough of a win in both directions so that you can come back and work together again. You're not looking for a once and done. You want a longer term relationship. And so I think getting away from the right, wrong, left, right, my way, your way, it's finding middle ground and being somebody who's viewed as an agreeable and reasonable person making logical and thoughtful proposals.
Hey, Cass, read me the last part of that question again, please, at the end.
How do you help them see the importance of it? And what are a couple of tips to help them?
Yeah, so to me, the importance is that it's less heavy lifting. It's less work. And the more you can exert influence, the less you have to exert strength. And by that, I mean failure work. I mean, going back to people and try to cajole them and convince them and so forth and so on. I used to have a guy who worked for me. He was a managing director in Minneapolis. And all year long, he told me he'd make his plan. All year long. We get to December, I'll make my plan. At the end of December, he missed his plan. And I said, what the hell, Gary? And he said to me, Alan, looking back, your expectations were wrong. And so here's a guy I didn't use enough influence with. I just trusted him. And I kept asking the wrong question, really. When are you going to make your plan? So I think the better you can wield influence, the lighter your load. And especially if you've got a lot, go back to accountability. If you have a lot of accountabilities, if you have a big operation, you're engaged in a very busy life. Being able to wield influence just makes life so much easier and managing so much easier. And, I'll give you a crazy example, but I think it's accurate. If you look at the extreme, probably the most powerful influence and effortless influence you can have is what? It's charisma. And if people choose to follow you, if they trust you, you have to do virtually nothing.
Hey, Alan and Gene, I got a question. If you're boiling down persuasion or influence into a couple minute opportunities, you only have a couple minutes at a time. Any suggestions or tips you would give when you only have that very short window?
My top tip is in the preparation side. Before that encounter comes in front of you, you have to have thought through some of these possibilities. Alan described the few potential things that might unfold when you walk into an office. You can prepare for that. You can prepare for potential resistance to an idea. Having thought through it and done some prep work is critical. We described several military examples where full-blown dress rehearsals take place to at least work through what are some of the potential challenges that may be faced. We described the raid on the Bin Laden compound. You know, it was extraordinarily well rehearsed, and they still had challenges, but they were able to persevere. You can't figure out every eventuality, but that preparation does help. Now, don't take that too far and allow yourself to lose the opportunity to be in the moment, because if you're clinging too tightly to a script, that will shine through as well, and you won't pick up on signals in the moment that are so critical.
Hey, Randy, do you know ahead of time whether or not you have that limited time or not?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you know ahead of time, I'd be very transparent and I'd say, Randy, look, we've got very limited time here. From my perspective, there are 3 critical issues in your organization and your business. I'd like to hear which one is the most important, or if you think there's a 4th, I'd love to hear that. Bang. I mean, that takes 20 seconds. And so, you know, in other words, let's both use this time together as best we can. And for God's sake, whenever you have limited time, in fact, in general, as a good rule, brevity, brevity, brevity.
You see how
Thanks.
much faster Alan got that out than I did?
Hey, thanks, gentlemen. That's great insight. I appreciate it.
Good question, Randy.
Hi, it's LaDawn Townsend. I have a question. Hi, Jean, Alan.
Hi there.
Hi, glad to be here today. So this is a question I might be telling on myself a bit, but I'm okay with doing that. So over the years, my business was leadership and revenue growth and all of that, but leading with leadership first. So we really focus on leading with influence, our recalibrate leadership methodology. We're finding a lot of our target is seasoned founders of established companies. They have teams, they're not newbies. We've come across a lot in the past 2 years where the founder CEO is extremely doubtful of themselves, thinking that they should step down for the CEO. So we go through a course of working with them. Our average engagement can be between 6 and 11 months. But what I find is they're not holding their team accountable. And that is an area of challenge to where they feel like we're family, right? But I'm like, but Bob hasn't been performing for 8 months and he's a C-suite executive. Like, we have to do something. So what they want us to do is to come in and coach their executive team or their team to be like the velvet hammer, right? And that's not an area that I want to go in the business. Any tips on how do you get that person who is the ultimate responsible in authority to actually take authority? Or is it a gap of maybe we're prospecting and bringing on the wrong people?
Let me stop you there, Ellen. I can't answer that last question about prospecting because I don't know, but I'll tell you this. From that very detailed description, you know, there are at least 3 business model errors that I think you have there, not to be overly critical, but to be honest.
Yes.
The first is that if somebody's not going to change in 30 days, they need a coach. If they're not going to change in 90 days, they're not going to change. And so 11 months is way too expensive, way too much time, and it's probably not going to work well. And certainly not help the business because it's not short term. The second thing is that people change because of things in their self-interest. And so you've got to focus on what's in this person's self-interest that will gratify them, that will make them happier, and show them there's a demonstrable and substantive improvement, not just theoretical, right? The third thing is that these people don't have teams. They have committees. They're not going to be supported by a team. Organizations rarely have teams. They have committees, meaning people get together, but they act in their own self-interest. You know, if you look at Congress, Congress has committees. And what happens is a true team, shares information, shares resources, shares budget, so everybody wins. That's rarely the case in organizations, sorry. And so you have to be a combination of honest and almost provocative and contrarian with these people to shock them into what's really going to be in their self-interest. And the final thing I'd say to you is this. I don't think it's a question of them feeling unworthy. I think it's a question of angst. I think what they have high anxiety because the economy has changed, technology has changed, society has changed, you know, yada, yada, yada. And it's like a TKO. It's like a technical knockout in a fight. They're still on their feet, but the referee says, I'm sorry, you're done. So I would look at your business model holistically and really say, okay, we need to change some things here for contemporary times. All right. I hope that's helpful. I didn't mean to be so critical, but I hope it's helpful.
No, it was perfect. It's okay. Be critical. It's what I needed. Thank you, Alan.
What? I didn't hear the last part.
No, It was
was perfect.
perfect. I needed the criticalness. Thank you.
I just want to make sure they got on the tape. Thank you. Gene, go ahead.
I would only add that what I heard in the description was fear on the part of the accountable person. And typically when the person with accountability is fearful, there is the anxiety that Alan is describing. I would associate it with somebody who feels unprepared for the role that they're in. And that has to be addressed head on.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for the good question.
60 people online. There must be another question.
Oh, God, I got more pages here. I just bothered to do that. Okay.
Hi, this
Cass,
is
anything in
Gary.
the chat?
I think Rex has another question.
Yeah, I have another question. On page 49, chapter 5, you talk about,
Wow.
a little analytical. You talk
Let me go
about
back.
applying $1 million influence requires that you discern how the organization works. I think I have an overall view on that, but any tips on how to cut to the chase on learning how discerning how the organization works?
Oh, yeah. You want to go first, Gene?
Sure. I think, as you're approaching an organization, you may not hit the right target on the first try, but asking open-ended questions about how things work is fair game. And getting somebody to talk about their job is usually pretty easy. Tell me what you do here and tell me how this works. And what do you like about this? That sort of thing can open up a broader conversation that may just give you a couple of lines of bearing that you're trying to cross-fix on that you might not have known about, that it could lead you somewhere else. But I think, it's just general good common sense to allow people space to talk about what they do. Most people are quite comfortable doing that, and you'll learn good or bad in that conversation.
Hey, Rex, there's an old line that says, you're going to believe me or your lying eyes. And I don't believe what I read or I hear. I only believe what I see. And so I'll look around an organization, I'll see what the behaviors are. And I'm going to define culture for you because most people don't have a clue as to what culture is. Culture is that set of beliefs which governs behaviors. And so when you see the behaviors, you can infer what the beliefs are. And that's how organizations work. And so it doesn't matter what an executive says. If people are rewarded for cutting the rules, for breaking the rules, for getting sales in without a signature or whatever, but they're rewarded for that, other people will emulate that. And so if you want to see how an organization works, check the behavior of the leaders and you'll see it cascade down. And for better or for worse, it might be great, it might not be. But if you want to change that behavior, change how the organization works, you got to change the belief system.
A little clarification on that, Alan. If it's an initial conversation, I mean, do you ask for a little tour or you ask for?
Forget about it. In the initial conversation, you're never going to know how the organization works. That's not the point. That's premature.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so what you're working, look, a sale is a series of yeses, and so small yeses. And so in the initial conversation, you want to build trust, you want to learn what the issues are and so forth. You'll find out how the organization works later.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Gary. Am I?
You're on, Gary. You're on.
All right. So I've got a situation where the president of the company, very well-intended individual, but does not hold himself accountable, and therefore he has trouble obviously holding his organization accountable because they're going to point their fingers back at him, and trying to help him really see that and change that behavior. Your thoughts?
My experience is that you have to show people empirical evidence and observed behavior. You can't say, I think you're not accountable enough. You have to say that you agreed that there'd be a new bonus proposal discussed by the executive committee on May the 1st, and it wasn't discussed. And it wasn't discussed because you didn't get the firm responsible to be there. And so how do you think other people look at that now if they're looking at getting their budget submitted or whatever? So social proof, observed behavior, empirical evidence, That's what gets people to change. Now, if they still refuse to change, I said to a CEO once, Rick, the problem is you cut people off before they're finished with their sentences. I said, and that, he says, no, I don't. I said, you just did it. And so you need to show that stuff happening. And if they still refuse to change after that, then you're back to what I talked about earlier. You're not going to get them to change.
We used the words, Alan, that accountability means something either happened or did not happen. And it's clear. There's prima facie evidence either way.
Gary, is that good?
No, it was excellent.
Wendy had a hand up.
So I want to tie the cultural behavioral comment with LaDonna's question about the culture being we're a family and the behavior needing to change. LaDonna, jump in here. The behavior needing to change because I have similar situations, and family is one of the things that people are proud of. They're very proud that their organization is like a family, and that does keep them from holding others accountable, whether or not they hold themselves accountable. So I'm interested, both of you, Jean, from your military background where there's a lot of ability to give direction, and then LaDonna, from your and my standpoint, where we can call things out, but we really can't make the changes ourselves.
Because you don't have the authority.
Right.
Well, listen, I'm sorry, Gene, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if people missed Stephen Colbert the other night with Michelle Obama, there was a great skit about a family meeting where Colbert and Michelle Obama are the mom and dad on the couch talking to their kids. Now, who hasn't had a family meeting where we're going to have in the Navy, we call it a come around, and we're going to recalibrate what the rules of the family are, whether there's child misbehavior or whatever. But occasionally there needs to be a family meeting. So we're not running a family here, as you're describing. We're running a business, and I think there has to be a little crossover there. So, Alan, over to you.
Look, unless it's truly a family business, meaning it's people related to each other running the business, you don't want a family business. In fact, family businesses are terrible because they breathe their own exhaust. What you need are people from the outside. That's what kills family businesses. And when you look at your company as a family, even though they're not related, but you want to create a familial kind of environment, it's a huge error. It's not a viable kind of structure. First of all, you should be focused on your customer. And second, on the quality of your product and services to please the customer and bring in more customers. But what happens is you get distracted because the person isn't performing well in sales, but because they are a quote unquote family member, you can't get rid of them. You have to adore them. You have to give them more support. And the big error that companies make, forget whether they look at themselves as families or not, is they invest money in remedial stuff instead of their all-stars. In a family, you have these, even a pseudo family, you have this dynamic where everybody is of the same value and you have to listen to all their opinions and you have to appease them and so forth. It's the worst kind of philosophy if you're running a business. So, I don't know about you, but I would be bold and I would say, look, this is a business, not a family. And these aren't family members, they're employees. And they're valued people and they should be treated with respect and dignity, in return for which they should be performing well and understanding they have to make some tough decisions. Quid pro quo. Wendy, am I answering your question?
Yes, the piece that I'm writing down is they should be treated with respect and dignity in return for which. So
Yeah.
LaDonna, does that phrase work for you?
I'm going to follow Alan of be more honest and provocative and just call it like it is, because I could, for me, I realized I have not been doing that as much as I should, and really just being like straight for the jugular in a non-graphic way, but it's needed because these companies are flipping folding or they're getting investment money and so it's a mess out here. So that really helped me today, is just call it like it is. We're the consultant, not their friend.
That's right. I want to talk to you about PTP. And PTP is a dread disease. It's called propensity to please. And we feel our goal, our mission is to please people. It's not. Our mission is not for affection. Our mission is for respect. And, I define empathy as feeling what someone else feels. I define sympathy as feeling sorry for people. So tough love is empathy without the sympathy. And that's what really great coaches do and great consultants do. They look at things honestly with the intent that I am trying to help you. But this is the route I have to take to help you. So if that's tough love, so be it. We have to watch out we don't get sucked into the family and become part of it and codependent.
The way that I deal with that, LaDon, which is pretty common in my world because I deal with a lot of technology folks who are not selected for empathy and who are who have to sometimes make really difficult choices, is we get alignment with the client on what the difficult decision is. And then we say, okay, when you think about having this hard conversation with this person and you think about the words that you have to say, how are you going to feel in that moment? Or how do you feel just thinking about it? And I work with them to deal with the emotion, and that allows them to behave in the way that they know that they should. And I separate the behavior from the emotional reaction. And by breaking it down into that tiny little increment of how do you feel when you think about this, it helps them to behave the way that they feel that they really ought to.
Yes, I see one in the chat there. You want to read that about R&D? I think I could take a stab at it.
Sure. So Michael is asking, if you have 60 minutes to influence or convince 100 R&D execs or scientists that the middle management brain drain is not an HR issue, but rather a culture issue, what 3 points hold the most weight for this group?
Okay, I need to hear that one more time. If you have
60 minutes, say, to influence 100 R&D execs or scientists that the middle management brain drain is not an HR issue, but rather is a culture issue, what 3 points hold the most weight for this group of people?
You want to go ahead, Gene? You want me to go?
Sure. I see, I'm exploring this from the defense perspective, the defense industry perspective. My association with R&D is it is typically trying to fit into some roadmap that somebody has derived. Either the government has a conceptual roadmap, or industry is bringing forward a roadmap to show that where a technology might go. If you were guiding a group to show holes in their roadmap, how the various pathways and split offs on the way to this future state may or may not unfold, when you start to poke around at the authorities, the accountabilities, the responsibilities, if you can't see alignment there, it should reveal that there are gaps in some of the interim objectives that would be required to get to the future state. So I'm not sure it would even take 60 minutes, and unless you have some exceptionally complex technology. I would think in 15 to 20 minutes at a whiteboard, asking that group questions about their roadmap would reveal all sorts of opportunity for recognition that we can't get there from here.
Well, this hour sounds to me like it's a speech, a presentation of some kind, but I'm going to tell you should do it in 60 seconds. And the 60 seconds looks like this. I would say to the R&D managers, if that's who these people are, if you were being hired into R&D, who would you prefer to be interviewed by to get a key job? And they will probably say to you, the R&D vice president or another person in R&D. They're not going to say human resources, just like they're not going to say finance. And so I would put it to them that directly. So once they conclude, well, I would be interviewed by a senior R&D person or a director or manager, say, fine, that's where it belongs. It belongs with you. It doesn't belong in HR because they don't understand R&D like you do. So that would be the social proof that I would use. And that's why I had to take a minute to understand this question. The hour threw me off. You don't need an hour to do that. Hey, Rex, by the way, I saw something in chat here. about initials. It was PTP, if that's what you mean, potential to please. Okay, Cass, what else we got?
There's a trademark on that already, right?
Yes, and PTH is the other one, potential to help. And a lot of people ask themselves immediately, how can I help this person? How can I help this company? I can help them. How can I help them? I don't ask that question. The question I ask is, and do not send me letters, I will explain. I ask first, what's in it for me? And I don't mean how much money. What I mean is this a learning experience? Will I enjoy this? Is this something where I can bring real value? What's in it for me? Because I can help all kinds of people, but it doesn't mean I should, because it might not be a good application of my talents. I might not enjoy it. I might not learn. So even asking the question, there's potential to help. Can I help them? The answer is invariably going to be no, 99% of the time, but that's not the question to ask. Okay, who else we got?
Time is running out.
So I have a question, and that is, in the world that we live in now, as a result of the whole COVID and people working remotely, and now, how has influence been affected by being able to create the kinds of cultures and teams that organizations might have had when you have a hybrid policy, or a policy where you have like almost two different kinds of organizations, because some people are there and some people are not?
That's a really excellent question, because in my view, a lot of influence is wielded best interpersonally and in person. What they call it, pressing the flesh, shaking hands, socialization, having a meal together, a casual moment, watching body language. That's very important. So what happens remotely is, drum roll, language is more important than ever. Metaphors are more important than ever. Analogies are more important than ever. A mastery of vocabulary. And if you listen, when I talk, I always bring up examples, social proof, always, 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 because people can buy into that. And so you have to learn to use these sort of levers to multiply your influence, because you can't use the other ones that are more naturally there. And language is a universal tool. So I would master my language. I would create metaphors. I said something on my forums this morning. I said, politics has become theology. And so consequently, instead of debates, we have crusades. And that just riveted people, because nobody won in the crusades. It were bloody, horrible battles. But when you fight for theology, no matter which side you're on, what you believe, that's what happens. So when you can learn to talk like that and parenthetically write like that, you can wield great influence even though you're not physically present. Is that helpful, Sonia? Gene, over to you.
I would offer just a couple of additions. I think virtual has allowed people to be a little lazy and sit back. It almost feeds into people's fear of engagement, because they feel a bit of detachment and they can end the meeting fairly quickly. They miss out in doing so. On the other end of the spectrum, I've been counseling people who are rushing back to trade shows to question their motives for those trade shows. I'm in Washington, D.C. today. I walked into the hotel last night. There's a full-blown defense reception in motion, hundreds of people there. And I laughed to myself, because so many are just there and happy to see other people again. They're back in the swim, but they're not there with real purpose. They haven't really figured out what are they trying to accomplish by attending some of these events. So I've been encouraging people to be thoughtful about what are you trying to get out of the various interpersonal engagements that you do participate in, whether it's a trade show, whether it's a reception, whether it's a small meeting. I think, as Alan said right at the top, the little sidebar interpersonal connections that can happen in a live meeting are irreplaceable. And so if you feel like you're stuck in a hybrid environment, I would be looking for opportunities to suggest people come back out of the basements and get out a little bit more.
Thank you
My
so
two
much.
cents.
I believe Ingrid has her hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. What a great opportunity. Thank you so much. So I work in the field of stress relief and increasing resilience. And the problem with in my field is that in order to create resilience, we also have to release trauma. And that's a very touchy feeling in a company or in any organization. I've worked with military and also, general organizations. So any suggestion how to address this successfully without people feeling like it's personal, private, or to address outside of the company?
Ingrid, your very first words, you said you work in the field of, would you just repeat that for me?
Yeah, stress release and resilience.
And
So
I'm sorry, do you do that as a coach one-on-one, or do you do it for organizations?
I do both. I do both, and I would like to do more in organizations. And this is really a topic that I find hard to introduce sometimes.
So now, I'll give you my reactions, but please tell me if I'm going in the wrong direction here. Okay, I want to make sure I understand. It seems to me that people feel that they should that the ideal is to lead a stress-free existence, and that's a fallacy. Too much stress creates distress, but the right amount of stress creates eustress, and eustress creates energy and an adrenaline flow and so forth. And if you look at the literature, people who have a moderate amount of stress, like a bell curve, which they can successfully manage, are the most productive. If they have too much stress, they're paralyzed. If they have too little stress, they sit back and say, why bother? Nobody's after me. And resilience, I I co-authored a book on resilience with Richard Citron. And resilience to me is always a bounce forward. It's not a recovery and a bounce back, it's a bounce forward. And so it's a learning experience, and it prepares you better for the future. And the most successful leaders I've ever dealt with aren't error-free. They make errors, but the difference is they have the resilience to learn and bounce back from the error. So again, that's the social proof I would point to. And the fact that these are tremendously important traits for anyone if they're going to succeed. Now, I'm going to stop here. Am I in the right place for you?
To some degree. I guess my question, thank you. Yeah, it's very helpful. My next question would be, so I work with stress relief tools and also give strategies to increase resilience. So it's both. The data has shown that we tend to repeat trauma. So if we want to move forward, but we have traumatic memories, we have a tendency to borrow from those and kind of look in that same direction again. And I basically help people release this. And there seems to be a lack of understanding or a lack of willingness or perceived weakness. A lot people that I deal with, they are concerned to be perceived as weak if they admit that a situation has been traumatic. And I think just in the economy, the last few years, it's been very traumatic for everybody. So
it has been. Gene, do you want to respond?
I would come in with the military example. As we were rolling deep into the wars, the invisible wounds were becoming much more clear. Some champions need to emerge in the most senior ranks. So that meant generals need to come forward and admit a little more publicly that they're not perfect. I think there's an image in society about how the best generals and admirals are these forceful, excessively charismatic people. That's often not the case, but those that can show some more normal character traits of vulnerability and a little bit of humility, and that these issues affect them as well, it's critical to get. It's a way to demonstrate influence to more junior people who may fear judgment or fear being repositioned because they're not up to some task for a short period of time and they need to go, recalibrate. If you can identify some senior champions, and it may require bringing somebody from the outside of this particular organization to tell their story, it's a way to open a line of communication.
That's helpful. Thank you. Do you think that creating videos, documentary testimonials this way would be a way to do that, or would it have to be personal?
It's a little outside of my area. I would think it's a multimodal experience.
Yeah, it depends how people best learn, really.
Appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for another question?
What do you think, Cass? One more?
Let's do one more. Does anybody have a final question they want to unmute themselves and ask?
I have a question, but I asked one, so if somebody had their hands up before me. So make sure I didn't jump in. I'd be interested to hear from Alan and Jean. You know, today the term coach, consultant, advisor, strategist has been so muddied. And what I'm hearing a lot today has just helped me in some questions that I was asking internally. And I will do that holistic view of my business, Alan, today, because that is going to help a lot. I would love to hear from you as leaders here today and going into support organizations. How do you determine coach, consultant, strategist, advisor when the term has been just redefined today in order to really set ourselves up in the market as the experts that we are?
You don't. I just ran something in Miami called Beyond Thought Leadership. And you, at the very end of what you said, LaDawn, is the key. You're an expert. And as an expert, you decide how to disseminate your expertise. Never let the client tell you. You decide. But you never want to position yourself in terms of what you do. You want to position yourself in terms of what you create. And so with your expertise, for any given client, you might coach, you might consult, you might facilitate, you might write, you might speak. I could go on and on and on, right? You determine with the client what the right intervention is, but you do that after you decide what the client's desired results are. And then you determine, how does my expertise best suit this? And by the way, a key determination here is the difference between coaching and advising. Because in terms of what you wind up doing, for my money, a coach has to be short term. I talked before about 30 days and 90 days. After that, you have codependency. If you're truly coaching someone on something and they haven't learned it. Advising, though, I mean, you can go on forever because you're a sounding board. People come to you for your objective advice. I told somebody the other day, look, I don't care if you ignore me. You're paying me. Ignore me if you like. I give you my best advice. After that, it's up to you what you do with it. That's, your accountability. So I would urge you to look at yourself as an expert and to then determine how best that expertise is applied to any client. A woman who's in my coaching program, who's extraordinarily successful, said to me that one of the changes I made in her life was I got her to stop calling herself an expert and starting calling herself the expert. Jean, go ahead. You wrap it up.
Yeah, I don't do coaching. I do long-term advisement. And no two of my client engagements are the same. And it's exactly as Alan describes. And that's because I'm such a believer in his methodologies and ideas on these things. Recognizing, excuse me, that I have the skill sets up here. I don't necessarily know which are going to be necessary or applied, but over time, the client and I develop that relationship. And it's long-term, and I continue to learn from clients. I continue to invest in myself so that I'm able to serve different types of clients, but no two are alike. And you may have some general themes that you're comfortable putting on the table as offerings, but being willing to serve whatever need arises, if you're capable, gives you a lot of flexibility to work with a lot of different kinds of companies. I have small, medium, large, international, family-owned, private equity-owned, public companies. The combinations are endless.
All right.
you.
Does that help?
Thank you for the question. Jean and I have over-delivered here by 2 minutes.
I just want to remind everybody of the agreement you made in exchange for this was to look at the book fairly. And if you're so inclined, please give us a favorable review. I see the Amazon page is beginning to populate, and we appreciate that the evangelism and the referral of the book. It was a thrill for me to participate in it with Alan, and I'm glad you're enjoying it. And Alan, over to you for the final comment.
I just want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for your interest in our work. And I want to wish you continued success and health. Godspeed. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.